Greetings and welcome to you on this session of the Gospel of Mark. I'm Pastor Timothy Muse, lead pastor here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Alliance, Ohio. It's a joy to be with you today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making this a part of your ritual, part of your routine as you spend your time together. I'm always blessed to be part of it. You know, I say on my podcast, and I say often, that time is definitely our greatest commodity. It is what we have, is the most valuable thing to us. Money does nothing if we don't have time, and energy does nothing if we don't have time. Time is our greatest commodity. So thank you for being part of this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged and involved and invested in what we're doing. I really, truly do appreciate it. I really do I appreciate your time and your investment in this. If you weren't here, if you weren't part of this, then I would just be talking to myself, and I don't want to do that. Particularly not in this format. So thanks for being part of the conversation. Thanks for being part of the dialogue. And thanks for being part of the work in the ministry. So if this is the first time that you're with us, welcome aboard. As I said, this is session number 12. So if you are joining us the first time, I would definitely encourage you to stay. You don't need to leave. You're going to be able to get a great deal of stuff out of this session for sure. But I would also encourage you to go back and listen to the previous sessions. They're all there on my YouTube channel for the Gospel of Mark. And you can also go back and listen. I did the Gospel of John, the book of Romans, the book of Revelation. So they're all back there as well. Different ways you can connect and listen if you really want to dig deeper into your faith and dig deeper into the scriptures. Those have been put out over the past few years. So it's awesome. It's a great opportunity. So if you'd like to participate in that, I would certainly encourage you to do so. As well, if you're returning, then welcome back. Thanks for your continued investment. Thank you for your continued work and your continued desire to be part of this. Definitely, if this is helpful for you, then please share it out there. Get it out there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. So anytime that a new episode pops up, that YouTube will inform you of that. But also then you can share it out there. You can get it out there to others for those to listen to it and engage it. You can email this, direct message it, however it would work for you. Get it out there. Make it a part of your ritual. Make it a part of your routine. That's one of the joys of being Christian, is that we are called to share our faith. And in the new age that we live in this beautiful age that we live in, we can share our faith easily by just go ahead and sharing, clicking, what have you. So get it out there. Share this with others. Direct message it, email it, text it, however you best function for the sake of the work, because we truly would be a benefit and a blessing if you did that. It really, truly would. It truly would be a benefit and a blessing to have the ability to reach people that maybe aren't part of our circle and part of our social media circle. And that's the great thing about social media. You know, if you share this out there on your social media account, then it connects with everybody who's on your social media account, and they get to see it. So it's a great way to, high impact, low investment. And I really think that in a lot of ways, that's what we want. We want high impact, low investment. And so let's do it. Let's do it. Get it out there. Get it out there so that that's what happens. It would be awesome if you're willing to do that, if you're capable of doing that. So get it out there so that others can experience it and others can get it and enjoy it. So definitely. And thank you for being part of this. I definitely would encourage you to have a Bible open before you, whether it's digital or paper. It doesn't matter whether it's a translation or a paraphrase. I'm going to be reading from the NRSV. The New Revised Standard Version, that's the one that I work with. But it can be anything that you want, any possibility, any translation, any language. I mean, if you can read it, it's awesome. Now, I understand if you can't. I understand if you're working out or you're driving or you're doing something else while you're listening. I do that often. I listen to podcasts and I listen to other things while I'm driving, while I'm working out. So if that's what you're doing, then great. And you definitely can't have a Bible open before you. And I totally get that. And I don't want you to log off. I want you to keep listening. I want you to keep engaging. But if you can have a Bible open, it really does help to be able to follow along and see where things are going and see where things are at. So follow along in this, follow along in the ideas and in the work as best you can. So that's awesome and incredible. And Mark is the second book of the New Testament. The Bible's divided up into two sections, Old Testament, New Testament. Old Testament, the Old Covenant's the story of God from the creation of the world all the way up to the birth of Christ. And then the New Testament is the birth of Christ through the rebirth of the world at the end of book of Revelation. So we're in the New Testament. Mark is the second book. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, it's the second gospel. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are what's called synoptic gospels. They walk walk in synonym, or they have synchronicity one to the other. So they walk in synchronicity. The stories walk in synchronicity. John has a little bit of a different take. John has a little bit of a different timeline, but that's okay. In that, it tells a very similar story. It gives a lot of different details. Matthew is first, even though it is not the oldest or the first written. Mark is the first written about 70 BC, about 10 to 20 years before Matthew and Luke were written. But it was believed when the canon fathers put the Bible together that Matthew was written first. So that's why Matthew shows up before Mark in how we understand the canon today and how it is laid out for us today. So we're in the Gospel of Mark here. We're in chapter 4, so that's where we're going to begin. We've been following up, walking through the story of Jesus up to this point, so now we are beginning chapter 4. Now, chapter 4 is really kind of a pivotal turn here, because chapter 4 tells the story of the first part of Jesus' mission and Jesus' ministry, and that's what we're going to jump into. So this is chapter 4, verse 1 and following. Again, he, Jesus, began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there, while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables, and in his teachings he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil, and when the sun rose it was scorched. And since it had no root, it withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no gain. Other seeds fell on the good soil and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30, 60, and 100-fold. And he said, Let anyone with ears to hear listen. Let anyone with ears to hear listen." Okay, so that's what we know as the parable of the sower. And this is really the first part where we get into the idea of parables. Jesus taught in parables. Now, a parable, as defined by dictionary.com, tapping into Oxford and Merriam-Webster, a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson, as told by Jesus in the gospel. So a parable is a simple story, but it has a much deeper meaning. Rather than straight up telling what the meaning is, because most people really, and it's not that they wouldn't be able to grasp it, but they had to, it's easier to hear in stories, and we see that. I mean, I know one of the frustrating things for me, one of the difficult things for me is I'll watch advertisement, and I'll watch, car advertisers or lawyers or what have you, and they're, they've got these little vignettes that are just stupid and over the top. But the whole point is this: you tell a story because it helps people to learn better. They're little parables is what they are. They're little parables. They're little things that people follow along with. And that's what they are. They're just little parables. So Jesus is teaching in parables. He is teaching in parables. He's teaching in words. He's teaching in directions. So it's really an important aspect that we see this. And we're going to see this again and again as Jesus moves forward in his willingness to teach in parables. So he wants the people to know, he wants the people to learn, but he's doing this in a veiled truth, in a veiled understanding. So he's teaching, but he's teaching in a veiled understanding of how things work. He's not just putting it out there, straight out there. He's unfolding things slowly. And he's teaching and we're going to see that he unfolds things slowly for the crowds and a little bit more abruptly for the disciples, but not a whole lot. He doesn't go too terribly quickly. He still holds information and knowledge at a distance, and that's an important thing for us to realize as to how Jesus is working and how Jesus interacts in the world. So he starts to tell a parable. So again, he is gathered by, a large crowd gathers around him to the such that, and really they're so pressing in on him. And the idea of getting into a boat and going out on the sea, it gives him a platform where he's a little bit further out, okay? So people can see him. If he's teaching on the seashore and people are gathered around him, well, then only the first 2 or 3 rows are going to be able to see him. And he wants everybody to see him. So he gets in the boat and he goes out. I mean, he doesn't go out very far. He goes out a couple of feet, just enough to be out visible, just to create a little bit of separation between him and the rest of the crowd. And so here he is. I mean, he's out there on the boat. He's teaching. He's growing. He's doing doing his thing, and he's enjoying the ability to teach, even though, and a lot of people are listening and people are paying attention. And this is really important for the growth of the movement. And for some, this parable is, the definition parable number 1 of Jesus' mission. Okay, so there's going to be 2 really kind of definitive parables in the Gospel of Mark. This parable really tells the first part of the mission about who Jesus is. So when Jesus is telling this parable, then basically he's talking about the sower. Well, he's placing himself as the sower. His parable, his mission is to go out and sow the word. But he's talking about the parable in how this works. He's talking about how the mission is going to work and how things are going to work out. Now, for us to truly understand what is at stake here and how this is laid out, we have to understand agricultural practices in the time period, because we're so used to row planting. Okay, now that came along when the first settlers from England came and experienced the Native Americans. And the Native Americans taught the English, the white person, how to do row planting, and that's what we see with corn and with beans, as we see row planting. Well, that was not always the planting technique. That was not the agricultural technique of the time. Actually, that is something very different. So the agricultural aspect of the time was far more along the lines of just casting the seed out there, just throwing it. So if you think, the farmer would have a basket on his hip, okay, and he'd just be walking along and he'd dip his hands into the basket and grab a handful of seed and cast it out there, okay, just spray it out there. Now he'd be walking along in what would be the field where the ground was, but unlike planting one seed in a hole and one seed in a hole and one seed in a hole, he's kind of casting the seed out there. And he's doing it for a number of reasons. It's not just to grow the harvest, but it's also to feed the birds and to populate some of the other areas and get some growth to happen. So it's a very different agricultural stance. And one of the things, the first thing we might think of is, well, that's a waste. That's a waste of seed. Well, in terms of agriculture, yeah, it kind of is a waste of seed, but we need to look at this as a parable. And we need to think that it's not a waste when God casts the word out, okay? When we think about planting and we think about putting one seed in one hole, if we transpose this over to the word, if we think about planting the word, it's about speaking to one person and hoping that they will bear fruit. Well, that's a high investment for a high casualty if it doesn't work. So what needs to happen is something different. What needs to happen is you just need to throw the word out there, cast the word out over and over and over again, and hope and find that there will be some kind of meaning within it, some kind of meaning to be had, that it will land somewhere and that it will bear fruit. That's the point of casting the seed. That's the point of casting the word. So the sower goes out to sow, and what he does is he's reaching into the basket, he's pulling out handsful of the seed, and he's just tossing it out there so that it goes everywhere, so that it goes anywhere, so that the seed lands. And he lays out 4 specific types of ground. First is the footpath. That would be the place that everybody walks on. Well, nothing grows on the footpath because it's all packed down dirt. The water runs off, the seed doesn't fall in, and it basically sits on top of the ground. But when it sits on top of the ground, it actually feeds the birds. The birds come along and eat the seed, and they eat the seed, and then they take it up, and then they poop it out, and it grows somewhere else. So the footpath is not you're not going to look to find the harvest on the footpath, okay? But the sower is. Now, the sower's not sowing on the footpath, but the seed falls on the footpath, okay? It falls on the ground that doesn't have any seed, because he's just like throwing that seed out there. And that's the point, is he's just throwing the seed out there, and some of it's going to fall on the footpath. So the first area of ground that the seed falls on, the footpath. Footpath's not going to bear anything. Okay, the second area that the seed falls is along the rocky ground, which is what would be right along the edge of the footpath. Okay, so you need to understand that if your field is beside the road, okay, then you have your good soil, and I'm going to go backwards. You have your good soil. Then around the field, you have your weeds. Which, if you look at fields even today, now Alliance is in a pretty rural area. It's a town, but it's in a pretty rural area, and you see these fields where you get to the edge of a cornfield, and there's usually like a weed or a bramble patch or something that separates one to the other. Well, that's the weeds, and then next to the road is where your rocky ground is. And then next to the rocky ground is the road. So first you have the road, you have the hard packed down soil, nothing's going to happen. Next to that, you have the rocky ground. You have, and now there's a bunch of rocks, and it's kind of like the spillover for making the road, okay? The spillover, the packed down. It's going to have some dirt in it. So, like that pesky dandelion or that pesky grass that grows up in the cracks between the sidewalk, similar area. It's going to grow up, but there's no place for it to go. It's not going to grow very deep because there's no place for it to go. The roots have nowhere to go, okay? So because the roots have nowhere to go, then once it grows up fast because, there's only a little bit of dirt, but as soon as the sun comes up, it dries out and it fades away, okay? So it's not going to grow it's not going to grow real strong. It's not going to grow real healthy because the seed goes away, all right? And then the third style of ground is the weeds. The weeds are what is outside, on the outside edge of the farmer's field. And again, that ground is pretty good. It's pretty good indeed. The difficulty with the ground is that, there's weeds in it, and weeds grow faster. Dandelions and thistles, they grow faster. That's why they're weeds. Well, they grow up before the grain does, and they take all of the nutrients, they take all of the sunshine, and the grain can't grow. The seed can't produce harvest. So that's the third type of soil, and the last type of soil that Jesus talks about is the good soil. And the good soil bears fruit 30, 60, 100-fold. So it does what it's supposed to do. So each one of those soils does what they're supposed to do. Each one of those soils does what they can do with the seed. That's just how it works. That's what the soil does, is what it can with the seed. All right? And so that's what Jesus is talking about. And we may not grasp this, but if you were in the agricultural world, if you were in that world, you would understand exactly what Jesus is saying. Okay? And it would make perfect sense. Now, the thing is, it wouldn't make perfect sense. It would make perfect sense, but there would be a disconnect. Why is Jesus telling this parable? What is the point? Where is the parallel between that which is being told and that which is important? There needs to be a parallel. We need to make the connection and figure out what Jesus is trying to say here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to carry on. We're going to move on. This is verse 10 and following. When he was alone, those who were around him, along with the 12, asked him about the parable. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside everything comes in parable, in order that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." So Jesus is now, he's kind of like needling and poking at the Pharisees and needling and poking at the scribes. He says when they were alone, so this is when they were outside the crowd, when they were alone, those who were around him and the 12, they asked him about the parable. And he says, to you has been given the secrets of the kingdom of God. But to those outside, everything comes in parable. To those outside, to those who are looking for proof text, for those who are trying to deny, doubt, destroy, those who are not really committed, they're just looking for a little entertainment, they get parables. The Pharisees, the scribes, the leaders, they get parables because they need to learn a different lesson. They're not here. They need to learn not about salvation, but they need to learn how they have used and misused what God has given them for so long. That's the difference. The difference is that this is meant to be a way of bringing people into faith, but those who are supposed to be in faith, those who are supposed to know faith, those are the ones that are being pushed out. The Pharisees and the scribes. Again, and this is a little hard for us because we think Jesus is always loving and always graceful and always forgiving, and he is of course. However, with the Pharisees and the scribes, it has to be very careful, because if he is like that for them, then what happens is they then it's perceived that it's okay to do this. It's perceived that it's okay to act this way, and it's not. It's okay to turn away from God. So Jesus is definitely laying out a new order, a new path, a new understanding. He is giving new direction to new people, and part of that new direction is turning away from or driving away, like the temple called and the temple identity, because that's the way that's the new world order. That's the order that God is bringing. That's the work that Jesus is doing. So, all right, so then he goes on. He's going to go on, and we're going to see the definition of the parable here in the following section. So this is verse 13 and following. And he said to them, now this is when he's alone. This is when he's with the disciple and those who... And he said to them, do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on the rocky ground. When they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. But they have no root to endure for a while. But they have no root and endure only for a while. When trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are those sown among the thorns. These are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the lures of wealth and the desire of other things come and choke out the word, and it yields nothing. And these are the ones sown on the good soil. They hear the word and accept it and bear fruit, 30, 60, and 100-fold. So Jesus explains the parable then to the disciples, to those who follow, and basically he's like, look, this is the parable of parables for the first part. If you don't get this one, you're not going to get any of them. So you need to get this one. You need to grasp this one for all that it is and all that it is worth. So the sower, the one who's sowing the seed, is me. I am the sower. I am the one who has come to sow the word of God. My job, my role, my goal is to sow the word of God amongst the people. I have come to give the word. Now, understand this to be true. Now, as 21st century Protestants or Catholics or wherever you're listening from, we have immediate access to the word. We read it, we know it, we study it, we get it. You're getting it right now. And if you wanted to study even further, you could look up 1,000 different YouTube videos about the Gospel of Mark, and I'm sure you would find 10,000 worth. But the fact of the matter is this. At that time, they didn't have access to the word. They had access to what they were told. So Jesus is coming along and taking the power, taking the power and using it. He's coming along and using it for the use of the word. He's coming along and taking the word and giving it to the people. He's sharing it with the people, and not just to hide it, but he's opening it up for everyone and everywhere and everything to go. So the people now have access to the word. We have that access to the word, which is awesome. But for the people in the first century, they didn't have access to the word. So without access to the word, they didn't know what was going on. So Jesus has come along, and Jesus is sharing with them the word. So first and foremost, Jesus comes to bring the word to the people. He comes to give the word to the people. This is his primary role, to bring God to the people. As I've said before, he comes to be with the people. He comes to bring God to the people. So that's the whole point. So Jesus has come to be with the people, and he's come to spread the word. So he sees himself as the sower, and he's just throwing the word out there. Okay. Again, this is not meant to be, pinpoint agriculture. This is casting the word everywhere. Jesus is indiscriminate about where the word goes. He's throwing the word out there. He's walking along, casting the word out there, and he's not concerned about where he lands. He knows where it lands, and he actually lays out where it lands. The first place he lands is on the footpath, okay? And it's on the hard surface. Now remember, that was the first thing that we heard about with the seed. But Jesus says that is the devil's work. It lands on the footpath, and it's a hard heart. And as soon as the word of grace and the word of God shows up on a hard heart, the devil comes along and plucks it away. The devil comes along and takes it and uses it for something else, destroys it. So the hardness, the footpath is the hard heart, okay? That's first and foremost. So the word falls on the footpath. on the heart of those who don't care to change, the heart of those who are greedy or angry or hurt or bitter or disgusted or mean. And you know, and we see a lot of hard hearts in our lives. We see a lot of hard hearts and people who don't want their lives affected by the word, people who don't want their lives changed by the word. So their hearts are hardened and they don't get anywhere. They don't experience anything. They just have this hard heart issue. Okay, so that's the first thing we see. That's the first type of soil, is the footpath soil, the hardened soil. All right, and Satan just comes along. It's easy pickings. The word falls on the hardened heart, and it's easy pickings because Satan just comes along and says, "Nope, I'm going to pluck it up. I'm going to take it." Because you're not going to do anything with it. Your heart's hardened. You're filled with hatred and meanness and pain and suffering and circumstance. And you know, let's not say that these are unfaithful and not believers. I mean, a lot of believers have hardened hearts. They know what they want. They know what's right, and they'll hurt anybody to get it. And we experience that. We experience that in our lives all the time. I mean, I think we've all experienced kind of the meanness of the American Christian and the meanness of Christians. Unfortunately, it's there. It happens. So that's the hard heart. That's the first place that the seed falls, is it falls on the hard heart, on the footpath. So the second place it falls is amongst the rocky ground. This is the ground right along the edge of the footpath. And that ground, again, it has rocks in it, but it has some soil in it too. And Jesus explains this as being the soil of someone who, you know, they hear the word and it's so exciting. And we've met these types of people. They're so excited. They're so filled with zeal and so filled with excitement for the word. And everybody should know this. And I'm so happy. And then they breach some resistance and persecution and question, or maybe things don't always work out the way they want to. And the word withers away because, well, they don't have the depth, the power to be able to overcome it. They don't have the power to be able to overcome what the world is throwing at them. So they wither away. So the word doesn't bear fruit. It shrivels up and dies in amidst the people, in amidst the the concerns, the threats of the word. It shrivels up and dies. So that's the second part of the word. The third one that we see is it falls amongst the weeds. Okay, it falls along the edge of the good soil. And it grows because, hey, that's good soil, but it just hasn't been tilled. It hasn't been treated. So what happens is, the weeds grow up faster. That'd be the cares of the world. That'd be the wealth. That would be the daily things, the unwillingness to sacrifice for the word, the unwillingness to sacrifice or change behavior for the word. You know, the lure of the world draws people away. It draws people into this new and desired relationship. It draws people into something greater than where they are, or great. I'm using air quotes because you can't see it, but greater, something greater than the word, something greater than Jesus. More money, more wealth, more power. You know, and I think the devil works in all of those. I mean, the devil easily plucks off the hard heart. The devil comes along, evil comes along and works in that fear and that lack of depth, where people get the word and then they get a little bit of pushback or a little bit of persecution, and immediately, they drop the ball. This isn't for me. I'm not going any further. Heck no, blah, blah, blah. But the devil also works in the midst of the weeds. You don't need the word. You don't need that. Come along here. Have this, have that, have this, have that. And that's just not where it works. That's not how it is. So that's where it's at. So what happens is that, that people get lured away from the word when they're drawn into the lure of wealth and fame and and money and power, and that lure then drowns out the capability of the word. It chokes out the word. And then the last place where the word falls is on good soil. And we see that when the word falls on good soil, it produces not just one, but multiform. It produces all over the place. So when the word falls on good soil, then the word then it produces and it grows abundantly. It grows abundantly to the point that it creates this incredible, powerful, passionate thing. So it grows abundantly within the midst of the word. So what we see here is we see Jesus, again, and I think the big vision about this, the big thing that Jesus coming along is, this is not a targeted agricultural approach. This is throwing the word out there and letting it grow abundantly and letting it fall abundantly, which would be very different than what the Pharisees and the scribes would do, what the temple cult does. And this would be very different than what we would do, because we would see it as a waste. We would see it as a misuse of resources. And that's not what Jesus sees here. That's not the mission of the kingdom. Because the other side effect of what this is going to do, there's another side effect to this. And the other side effect of what this does, I mean, it's pretty easy when we're walking down the path to figure out what soil is what, but it's really hard to figure out where people are in their life and what soil they have. So the other side effect that this does is this actually does begin to reveal the person's soil makeup, if you will. As the word falls on all of us, and this is still true today, as the word falls on all of us, it reveals to us the soil makeup of each of us. What kind of soil resides in our home, in our lives, in our experience? What kind of soil are we? Well, we don't know. Jesus, we don't know until the word is cast upon us. We could think that we're good soil. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm good soil. I'm going to grow, a great abundance. And then when the seed lands on it and nothing happens, I wonder if I'm a little hard-hearted. Or we, oh yeah, I mean, I'm going to grow abundantly, and the soil falls on us, and we're like, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm too afraid to do this, or I want to be too rich, and I want to be too powerful, and that's not it. So when you put all those things together, it reveals the type of soil that someone is, just as much as it reveals the love and the grace and the abundance of God. The word of God is just freely cast out there, freely cast out there, freely cast out there, freely cast out there. And when that word then it falls on the different soil, well, then it reveals what kind of soil people are. It reveals what kind of people that there are, and how those people then will respond. And that's one of the big important things that we see coming out of the parable, is it does reveal the type of people that Jesus is encountering, and it reveals our own. When the word falls on us, it reveals our own type of soil. It reveals where we are. And that's important as well, because this isn't just some kind of intellectual exercise that we're participating in. This is our own walk of faith. And when the word of God is sown on us and in us, how we respond reveals the kind of soil that resides inside of us. How we respond reveals the kind of soil that we are, and who we are in the eyes of God and in the work of the world. So it's important. I mean, it really truly is. Again, this is not just a book that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago. This is a living document that continues to show revelation and grace and work to us even still today. All right, my friends, I'm going to leave it here for now. I'm going to put a pin in it, and we're going to pick it up next time. We certainly did enough, and we're going to see some more parables. We're going to get into more teachings and sayings of Jesus in different ways. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. As always, if you have any questions or comments, my contact information is going to come up at the end of the episode. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. If I can answer the questions in the next episode, I will. If not, then I'll try to reach out to you directly and answer any questions that you have. God bless you. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time.